Hi, I'm Matt Waldman, and I'm the author of the Rookie Scouting Portfolio. And I'm going to give you a quick tour of the 2015 RSP, which was released April 1st. The RSP is a draft guide, but it's based specifically on the offensive skill positions of quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. This year's edition has close to 150 prospects that are profiled. What makes this a unique guide, in addition to the fact that it's solely skill position based, is that it provides a little bit of fantasy, actually a whole lot of fantasy slant towards it, but at the same time retaining the integrity of a NFL draft guide. I'm giving you all my work for you to see on display. So this is a publication that's really serves three purposes. For one, if you're trying to learn more about studying skill position players, you're going to see my process very clearly. You're going to see how I watch the film, how I evaluate the players and break it down, and how I put all the information together to arrive at my rankings. And then you're also going to get a draft guide. So this particular publication, as you'll see in the upper corner here, of the number of pages, is 1,400 pages in length. But it's split in two parts. It's a 220-page draft guide that distills all my work, and then I show you all of the raw material work that I do throughout the year to 24 months in advance to put this all together. And then in May, I have a post-draft publication that is strictly fantasy oriented, that talks about the potential fits with players, the average draft position analysis that I perform, and give you a really strong strategy that includes rankings across all positions, a cheat sheet, you could say. Actually, it is a cheat sheet that gives you an idea of where and when to draft some of these players, what their value is relative to where they're getting picked in early fantasy drafts. And there are a lot of my readers say that they would probably pay the $19.95 for that alone, but they're getting both of these publications for that one $19.95 price. And usually after about year two or year three, those people who said they would just like to buy the post-draft publication come back to me and say, I really like the pre-draft too, because it gives me about 3 to 5 years of shelf life to look at players based on talent and not fit. And that helps a lot with waiver wire and making decisions on a larger, broader, long-term context for them. So this is the pre-draft publication. And the way to navigate this, because certainly you look at 1,414 pages and think, wow, this is going to be overwhelming, but it's not at all. Because if you go to this left-hand icon, which is the bookmark icon, you can also find it by going to File and going to View and see your navigation panels, and you're going to see bookmarks here, and you can click on that, and that'll open up your bookmark, as well as if you just clicked on this particular bookmark icon. You're going to see here that it's going to look like this. It's going to have the name of the publication. You can double click on the plus or click on the plus once, and it's going to bring all of these bookmarked areas. So you can go anywhere pretty much that you want to find things quickly. You want to see my write-up on Brett Hundley, you can click on Brett Hundley and it's going to take you directly to his write-up. If you want to see breakdowns that I do based on skill levels, say I want to see all the quarterbacks and how I rated their accuracy based on the talent of their accuracy, I'll click on that, and it'll give you an explanation of how I look at accuracy, as well as how I've rated all of these players, along with a key that shows why I bold some players, why I have them in underlined, or why I don't have them underlined at all, and give you a little issue about who's the best, who needs improvement, and who's the worst in this particular category area. So it's very easy to find everything when you're looking at this, and that's the basis of how I'm going to give this tour for you. Like I said, the RSP is based on my film study. So what we're going to look at first is really all my raw material notes, and not the draft guide section. The raw material notes are these checklist evaluations and play-by-play notes. And I'll take you here, and you can click on the plus sign here, actually down below, and it's sorted by quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end, and it's listed in alphabetical order. So say we want to look at a running back like Amir Abdullah. You're going to see his checklist analysis. It's going to show his basic information, who he played that day, what the score was of the game, what the weather conditions were, as well as what his game stats were. and I chart that. This is basically some basic charting work that I do to talk about, how many broken tackles he had, how many blocking assignments he had, how many blocks that he made, if he had any fumbles. I also look at I look at a variety of things, with different positions here, and you're going to see them all listed into different categories. You're going to have 5 different areas of power that I'm looking for, 3 different areas of balance, looking at 4 different ways I measure speed, receiving, blocking, vision, ball handling, elusiveness. It's all there. And I grade everything with a yes or no type of context here. Either they performed it according to the definition or they didn't. And the definitions for each of these points are available in my glossary. So if you go down to this very bottom here, I have a glossary of criteria, and you can scroll through that, and everything's listed in alphabetical order, each criteria point. And you can read about, whatever criteria point you want to and the value that I've come up for each of those things. So that's my work really there that I'm showing you. I'm showing you how I've graded them, and then I write down play by play everything that I see from that player. This is the insanity part for most people, because no one's going to read this. Some of you will, but most of you won't. And I wouldn't expect anybody to. These are my raw notes from just one game of Amir Abdullah's. And that's what goes into a lot of the analysis that I do, goes into a lot of what I do with my blogging, what I write for Football Outsiders, Football Guys, you name it, is from doing this kind of grunt work from 18 to 24 months in advance to put together this publication. I distill all of this. I show this to you because I want you guys to understand that, I'm not just making this stuff up. I have a process. And then I distill all of this into how I rank players. So with the quarterback class, for instance, with every class, I give you kind of an overview and impact over the position, kind of a historical perspective over what rookie productivity looks like for each position. This includes a little bit of data, gives you some, where they're drafted by round. I give you some information about production for rookies over a period of time. And then I talk about how I create my rankings. And then I go into the skill breakdowns. And I want to talk a little bit about the skill breakdowns versus the checklist breakdowns. These checklist evaluations here, this really grades the breadth of a player's talent, how broad it is in terms of fundamentals. Do they perform the baseline skills you're looking for at the position? If you were going to construct a perfect quarterback, in terms of hitting all of the check marks of different fundamentals you want in terms of how they address the game, this is my approximation of what that is. Then if you want to look at how talented they are at performing these areas, then it comes down to these skill breakdowns that I have. And that's the difference. For instance, you can have a player who has a very wide understanding of the fundamentals of their position, but not be very talented in any one specific area, and may not perform extremely well in the NFL. They might be good enough to be a reserve because they can do so many different things well enough to meet the bare minimum of what the NFL expects. But you may have guys who may only have 3 to 5 areas that are really NFL talent level in terms of what they do at that position, but the depth of their talent in those 3 to 5 areas is so amazingly strong that they can be stars in the league. Kelvin Benjamin is a good example of a player who didn't have a wide breadth of talent on his checklist, so he didn't score extremely high on the checklist. But in his skill breakdowns, he had 3 to 4 areas that were strong enough that it makes him a player that if you put him in the right position and have him do the things that he does well, such as working the boundaries, working the red zone, being able to play somebody one-on-one in those situations, he can be a 1,000-yard receiver for you. He can be a player that can do very well in a specific type of an offense, and he could be a nice fantasy player for you. So these checklists, while scored on a 100-point scale, are really showing you how close to 100% of the broad fundamentals does this guy actually meet. Whereas the skill breakdowns on this actually shows you a little bit more in terms of the depth of talent that he has and how close to being a star or starter or committee type of player or reserve he is in each of these specific areas. And at that point, that makes him something that is going to be a little bit more worthwhile for you when you're looking at that fantasy talent, or you're looking at in terms of how likely is he going to be able to translate as being a a high-end player. So that's kind of what this gives you here. And then as you go a little bit further, you can see that I then get into, I give you a little bit of information about who's overrated or underrated, and then I get into my rankings here. And each player ranked has a longer write-up that gives you an idea of his pluses and minuses, strengths and weaknesses, more of a summary of what I think about their game, and then a link maybe to some of their highlights, also maybe a link to the RSP film room or to different articles that I've written on the blog, as well as pre-draft NFL fantasy, pre-NFL draft fantasy advice about that player and where he fits into the overall scheme of a fantasy draft. Then I have a rankings table for you so that you can, if you wanted to print up this one particular thing and use it as a table to do for drafts or just access this, it just gives you a shorthand of, who he is, what his overall checklist score was, what his ceiling score is. His ceiling score is basically how likely what his checklist score would look like if he improved certain points. So for instance, Jameis Winston I have as a 96, meaning that he's got a pretty strong grasp of the broad range of fundamentals at the quarterback position. It's very high. His ceiling score, though, is really what he could potentially acquire in that particular checklist as he improves to get better. And as you can see, it's not much of a difference, which means to me that you wouldn't say he's a maxed out player because a 96 score is pretty high, but he doesn't have much to learn in terms of like the broad basic skills. He just has to get more. He just has to basically become more consistent, and he has to gain more depth to his talent to become that really strong starter in the NFL. And that depth of talent comes from those skill-based positions here in these breakdowns here. If you look at the breakdown, you'll see Jameis Winston. Where can I list something? I've got one listed here as a starter caliber player, but he's in bold, meaning that there's some easy fixes that he can make to his arm strength to have an even stronger arm. And he has a high ceiling because he can improve, and he has a strong enough arm already that he could develop into someone who has a very an almost special arm talent. So that's a little bit of an instance of give you an example of how that works. And you look at his score and you realize that he has his ceiling may not look high on the score here, but at the same time the depth of talent is a different story. I have listed here velocity and pocket. This shows whether they passed some pass-fail elements of the checklist. And then I have comparisons to players that I think stylistically he fits within a spectrum of, depending on how he improves or doesn't improve. Some little comments, an overview about where I have him, why I have him where he is in his ranking, and what his potential is. And then in addition to these types of things, I have a comparison table that gives you some of his combine and workout information, as well as the comparison and comments about the comparisons that I made. And then you have the ceiling score, and I rank that. It gives you an idea of, again, how high his ceiling is in terms of potential, and 100 is the highest score. Again, this is for that broad-based talent in terms of acquiring the basic skills and not how deep the talent goes. The overall rankings are really a better idea of where I think the depth of talent is related to everything else that these players do. So that's that's the basics of this. There's lots to look at, and certainly there's a lot to be reading. There's a lot to read and access. And most of my readers, again, really love the pre-draft because it gives them an idea 2, 3, 4 years from now who these players are, and it's all ranked on talent. So you're not just looking at players based on where you think they might get drafted. I'm not ranking them that way. I'm not trying to talk to scouts or to GMs or to, anybody connected to the draft game and rate a guy high because he's likely to go in the first round. I'm rating somebody like I rated Isaiah Crowell my top back last year as an example, and I knew that he wasn't going to get drafted. That was something that I was pretty clear about, and I made that clear in last year's publication. But at the same time, I let people know that this was a guy who had the talent to be one of the better rookies of his class as a running back. If he got an opportunity, and he did, and he flashed that last year to a very large degree. So this is why it gives you that shelf life, because you can look at free agents that your major draft media may go, who's this guy and where did he come from? And you could look at him in the RSP from 2015 and say, I know exactly what his strengths and weaknesses are. I know where he can fit well, and it'll help you make decisions whether to draft him in a redraft league, pick him up in a dynasty league, add him off the waiver wire, make a trade for him, and get the better end of the bargain here. So again, this is the rookie scouting portfolio for 2015. You can get this at mattwaldman.com. Or you can go to my blog, mattwaldmanrsp.com, and click the links to get you there. Again, it's $19.95 for this and the post-draft together. And you get an email that lets you know when the post-draft's ready, and you can download it. And 10% of each sale goes to Darkness to Light, which is an organization that is a charitable organization designed to educate people about the dangers in communities that exist for sexual abuse, and training people on prevention of sexual abuse and how to address sexual abuse correctly so that it doesn't inflict more damage on the community or the institution, and especially not the children who have been victimized by this crime. So it helps you understand, it's about helping people understand the dynamics that are involved with the situation. And they have done a lot of great work, including work in the Penn State University area, as well as many other places across the country. It's a terrific cause. And as a football fan, and what we saw happen, in 2012, I thought it was a great opportunity for us to respond as a community of fans towards a very worthwhile cause. So again, I would encourage you. It's a win-win for everybody here. And if you haven't gotten it for the first time, and you decide to do so, let me know what you think of it. I'm always interested in hearing. It's one of my favorite things to get the feedback from people who have ordered this for the first time. So again, I'm Matt Waldman. Thanks again, and have a good day.